Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's June 12th, 2024. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator focused on funded startups and enterprises and helps teams who are overwhelmed with AWS. We do this leveraging our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 100 million times. So if you or your team has been banging your head against the wall with underperforming infrastructure, just head over to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. Answer a few quick questions and you'll book a meeting with me directly. So how can you maximize today's session? First off, our format is very informal. Engage as much as you'd like. Ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, go for it. And for those of you on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Join us by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. Now, I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, share it with your team. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. In a few hours, you'll find the recording there. So with that said, announcements. All right, first one. So Pepe, one of our community members, is also an active maintainer of Atlantis. Atlantis, if you're not familiar with it, is like the original product to implement continuous delivery for Terraform using issue operations or issue ops on pull requests. The project was ultimately landed in HashiCorp after they hired, and I'm drawing a mental blank here on his name, but they have indicated interest that they'd be open to donating the project to the CNCF. So we'll share this link here in the chat. If you can go ahead and upvote this, it's got 74 now, so that's really nice and a good sign. I'll post it right now in the chat, so you can go upvote that. It's also an interesting way that the CNCF is organizing, and I haven't seen this GitHub app before. Maybe it's a custom one that they've written, but they're using it to manage applications into the CNCF Sandbox through upvotes. All right, any questions on the Atlantis application here? All right, here's something interesting. So a fun fact is it's actually possible on the command line to visually render images. I don't understand the technical aspects of it. I just know I've seen it before, and if you have a modern terminal that supports it, it'll work. Here's a ls command, though, that is kind of like a gallery view or thumbnail view for images in the directory. So if you're on the command line all the time, you have a modern terminal, you can still list and possibly view the images using this tool, LSIX. That said, can anyone explain to me how that actually works? All right, it was worth a shot. Next one. All right, so this was brought up to me. One of our devs is formerly in Russia. And I hadn't really seen anything discussed about it. So I thought this was interesting. DockerHub is blocked from Russia. And the response in here was they have to comply with US export control regulations, yada, yada, yada. And I know in some ways, like, cryptographic technology and some other things are restricted, but I mean, come on, this is going a little bit extreme, I thought. And I didn't see any announcement relating to this, but it was brought to my attention today, a press release from the US Treasury indicating a new tactic targeting not only just the financial infrastructure as they've been doing, but also IT infrastructure and dependencies. So Yeah, has anyone heard more about this? What other companies are doing this? I'd be curious if the same is true of like the AWS public registry, the Google container registry, the GitHub registry. And I mean, registries is just a small part of everything. No insights on this one? All right, next one. So I've been writing a lot of documentation lately, and I've really enjoyed using the Grammarly plugin for VS Code. It's not perfect, but hey, it worked until it was archived. So it's a bummer. I guess this was not an official Grammarly project. It was an independent effort. Any suggestions for VS Code for something similar? Seems like this should be possible using Copilot, but I don't either know the setting or it's not a feature yet. And I'm talking about like GitHub Copilot.
Is this the same Grammarly that we use as a Chrome extension?
It's the same API endpoint. It's not the same plugin, so to say. It's something you can put into VS Code.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Did you say that it was abandoned and that's why you're looking for something else?
Yeah, precisely.
But it has 110 forks. Did you look around if there's someone else took it over?
No, I didn't. Yeah, that's a lot of forks to go through. I don't think when you go to forks, can you repository type active filter last month, 6 months? Basically, I've always struggled when going through forks to try and find one that is actually maintained. I guess one can filter by activity, and that should be a positive indicator. That reduces the list quite a lot, and we see nothing's active.
Yeah, it's just dependable stuff everywhere.
Probably. All right. So that was that. Okay. This one struck a chord with me about self-service dashboards. Now, the topic here is specifically self-service dashboards as it relates to like data analytics, think Metabase, and those kinds of dashboards. I think it extends beyond that. And he makes a case how these self-service dashboards, they're great because that's what sells often the product to the person who has, power of the checkbook, but not necessarily to the end user. And his point is a good one because when you start looking at it, what it's really just doing is translating SQL to ClickOps, or he says SQL by mouse. And while that might get you something that works, you still have to understand the data itself. And it goes beyond the relationships. You got to understand like how it got there, the accuracy of it, the timeliness, what other rollups have already gone into that, and so forth. So it will probably fall back in your lap anyways, especially if you're one of the engineers promoting this dashboard. Since your hope was self-service, so it gets it off your plate and onto somebody else's, but they're still not going to have confidence in the data or the reports because they don't really know what it's based on. The other thing is, what do you do then as a developer? Well, the first thing you do is you look for where you can just write raw SQL because you get quickly frustrated with the limitations of the UI. Any thoughts on this one? This happens to be a screenshot of Metabase, a tool that we use actually. And I started using these, but quickly moved to SQL because it was just too limiting.
I think that the weird part about Metabase in particular is, I think that it's more of a mock-up tool in my own practice. I've used it usually just to look for the interesting data. I haven't found it to be very good at digging into that data. And so you almost, at least for me, I've almost always had to engineer something more special purpose if it's something that needs automation, or if it's, like you said, you want an actual dedicated report, you're probably going back to something that does SQL and exports some CSVs. But that's
Yeah.
just my 2 cents on Metabase and I think a
Yeah,
lot of the other
it can help
tools.
as a visual explorer, but the value then is largely diminished, right? In a short-term use case. The other thing he talks about is text to SQL approaches and like the AI/ML to do this, and that can very likely produce a valid SQL query, but if you're going to be making business decisions off of this, you got to be really certain that there are no hallucinations in that data, or it could have catastrophic effects on your planning. So I feel like in a tangential kind of way, this relates to another movement that I see a lot around infrastructure. And these platforms trying to create, self-service dashboards for engineers to click ops their way around a UI to build up a cloud architecture. Demos probably pretty well. I don't know if that's what I'd like to be maintaining in the long run. It's kind of like, maybe another way of looking at it is, if you have opinions about this stuff, then you probably don't want the tool generating it. If you don't have opinions about it, then you probably don't care about the tool doing it any way possible, except for the people on the hook in the long run to maintain it. When they got to look at that machine generated code on the back end from that front end UI, they're not going to like it either. So I think it's misaligned in the long run. And that's why ultimately I think the best interface, a Git repository with GitHub Actions or your CICD pipelines to automate these things. Have a nice, light, declarative interface to describe what you're trying to do and drive everything the same way you drive all the other things you do with CI and CD workflows. All right, any opinions on that before I move on? All right, next one. This one was kind of interesting. I have lots of different feelings about it. So Cloudflare is an interesting company because I think they've done a lot of good overall. They've brought a lot of sanity to the web. They've protected countless companies against DOS attacks. They give back in the form of open source. They have a platform that's incredibly affordable to the majority of users, even at a free tier, for unlimited bandwidth. So I put that in air quotes now, unlimited bandwidth, because that's what this article is kind of about. There are some opaque or unspoken triggers in Cloudflare. And when you get to a certain size, free is no longer free. And you might have built quite a business around it at that point because you're generating that much traffic. And this is where you might almost think about this as extortionist, what they describe here. But I've heard similar stories. In this situation, they've been paying for a business plan for a long time, which is quite reasonable, $250 a month. It's more expensive than some things, but for unlimited data, you can't beat that, right? And at some point, Cloudflare reaches out to them and says, hey, there's some settings potentially affecting our network. So they respond promptly to this and jump on a call. And it just turns out to be a sales call. They're not talking with any engineers. there's nothing actually impacting the performance of their network. It's impacting the performance of their bottom line. So after multiple back and forth emails, they weren't able to reach a resolution. And suddenly they just see all their sites getting deactivated on Cloudflare and they go dark. They actually were ready to pay for it at a significant jump from $250 a month to $10,000 per month. And they where it got hung up on is they wouldn't accept an annualized amortized payment over the year. They had to pay all 120K up front. That's a lot of money to come up with depending on the size of the company. You know, also you might not just have that sitting around, even if you have it available in other ways. So they got up and went to Fastly and haven't looked back. Has anyone encountered this or heard similar stories or any opinions on this one? I have to say, I've had a similar feeling, but it's not as severe. It's an exaggeration to say it's as severe, but there are these SaaS products out there that they get you on the rails at a really affordable rate. It feels like they're on your side. The company I'm thinking of in this case is HubSpot. HubSpot started out, you know, they have the free CRM. That's pretty cool when you're just getting started. And you can upgrade quickly for like $50 a month. Still totally reasonable, right? Especially if you're a small company getting off the ground. And then after that, to basically get anything else you want, it jumps up to like $1,500 a month or more. And that's a big jump to go from like $50 a month to $1,500 a month just so I can automate some emails. It's really frustrating when pricing works that way. So when my analogy here to Cloudflare is, you know, when you're selling a product that's $250 a month, and then you suddenly go for the, what is it? What's the expression? Anyways, you go for the juggler, right? And then they go from $250 to $10,000 a month. That's an exorbitant increase.
Yeah, I feel like they should just build that into their pricing model. Like if you exceed this many requests, and then we start charging you like a penny per request or something.
Yeah, transparency, right? So you can plan for it, so you can account for it. And this like 24 hours or we knock you out, that's not cool. So in other news, I guess Cloudflare hasn't been getting the best press lately. I'm not going to play the video or anything, but we'll share it here. They've been doing some layoffs there. And while the account executive here isn't maybe entirely in the right, I feel like the way they handled this was pretty poor. And I guess this is an example of how not to do a layoff. But yeah, that was that. All right. Last announcement I got, and then we'll get into Q&A, or if anybody else has some announcements. This link here, I guess since I already have Copilot, that's not going to work for me, but I think that's the same link you would use if you were going and didn't have it yet. Yeah, github.com/GitHub Copilot sign up. So there's an interesting thing here. If you have a reputation of, I guess what I can do, wow, I'm sharing that window. So if you have a open source track record, and they're a little bit opaque about this, is my understanding. It's not totally clear what you have to do to qualify, presumably so people don't game the system. But if you go to that link that we'll share, you might be eligible for free GitHub Copilot. And if you haven't been using GitHub Copilot, for example, with your editor, VSCode, or IntelliJ. It is pretty awesome. And my efficiency has gone up tremendously, especially as more recreational these days on the programming side. It lets me have fun without having to remember everything. Has anyone tried that? I know some members of our team have done it, and we're able to get free personal editions of GitHub Copilot. I'll share the link here in the Zoom chat so you can try it. All right. Well, that was the hack to get free GitHub Copilot. Any other announcements we should bring up? Oh, price level. There used to be another site like this. I forget what they were called. Let's see. Check this one out.
It's a newer site.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, see a lot of the things we use here. All right, have you used it personally, Mark?
Not yet, no. It didn't have the vendors we use. So maybe
Yeah,
Slack, but
yeah, Slack, Datadog, Google Workspaces,
I was
Gong,
looking for Cloudflare.
Oh, no Cloudflare, huh?
No, not yet.
Interesting.
It feels like I'm always at a deficit when dealing with contracts and negotiating discounts because I have no idea what the typical discount is for the industry.
Yeah.
So this could help, but really there's not that many insights yet.
Cool. Well, I guess what we can talk about just briefly, we talked last week about the whole Snowflake incident, and there's been a lot of updates back and forth since the initial news came out. It seems like there was no actual compromise of Snowflake itself. It's just that there were so many people using Snowflake that had their own credentials stolen by malware and sold on a marketplace. And the fact that a support engineer's account at Snowflake was compromised, an engineer who's no longer there or associated at least with an email address no longer there, I think, was just a coincidence, actually caught up in the same malware kind of hack as well. And the number of companies affected by this is just skyrocketing. So anyone have any other insights on the Snowflake hack that's going on? All right. Well, let's jump over into Q&A. Any questions we can get answered today? Open-ended here. Anything goes.
All right, I'll throw something out there, Eric. Just want to get some thoughts from folks here on implementing DevOps culture. There's only a few of us and there's many of them, and we cannot continue to live with people enforcing ignorance on their side at our expense. And we have enough conditional clauses everywhere that, people need to learn the platform that they're working on. Just to frame it from where I'm coming from, I know that there's some opinions out there. I'd love to hear them.
It's just a matter of cultural development. Being able to push back on these groups, whether they're teams or product owners or whoever, and being able to identify and track pain points over time is the only way you can do it. Say you've got a team that just refuses to develop testing procedures and they keep running manual testing cycles every other week, and they keep having failures because of outages in their testing surface. You know, manual testing is as good as anything else manual. Why would you not automate it? Just for an example. Like, it's just education, and most shops, most people can only learn through pain and expense. So that's the ongoing struggle. That's the reality of humanity. That's why I can't wait for our robot overlords.
Yeah, sometimes there's just no shortcut for learning things the hard way. And
Well, how do you make them learn? How do you make them,
don't make anybody learn, right? You know, just as I can't make everyone use Atmos. It sucks, but if we did, these problems would just go away.
It'd be so good.
Just make it so easy to use that it's not even an option to go any other route. Is the
Right.
way I look at it.
That is
You can't enforce culture. It doesn't work that way. But if you make it where people come to it, it works.
Yeah.
So
that is the wisest thing said. So it is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. People follow the path of least resistance, but there's still so much resistance, and that's why they're not following that path that you have right now. So what, you know, it's an iterative approach, but what can you do to pick up the roadblocks that are preventing them from doing that? Is it perception of difficulty? Is it perception of the cognitive load? Do you have too much cognitive load in what you have right now? And can you reduce that? Can you start by a smaller subset of things being more self-service? I know you're already using Spacelift. I know you're already using Terraform. I know you already have, you know, a lot of investment in your infrastructure so far. Can you find what's the word I'm looking for?
So here's the interesting thing, Eric. We
Yeah.
were acquired by a company called Stavvy a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I took my team through this process over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
I went from, you know, my devs slacking me versions to they're updating the versions.autotf file in the right environment, and everything else is them. I hear about production releases after the fact. I mean, I know.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it was years of like pushing back, of like, you know, doing it myself and feeling the pain with my team, and then implementing the automation. So it's the other side now, where like my guys just like stuff just keeps happening and it keeps working, and my devs are taking care of a lot of the ops part of DevOps. And we're trying to, you know, move this into the rest of the organization. So, you know, among my approaches were to always answer a question with a link to a wiki
Right.
page
That's a good
that I
habit.
insist that they co-own. You know, I'm like, fine, you know what? And you know, there's a fine line to walk between being a complete jerk and leading someone. You know, the word education means to like educare, lead out of ignorance. You know, you gotta, as you said, somebody, you know, said, like, you have to open the right doors, but you also have to back it up. And you have to be able to say, okay, you do this, look at those docs, do that checklist before you submit that Docker image. And when that's done, we'll talk. And then the next time you say, oh, great, what do the logs say? I'm not your, this is like a term of art, log bitch, you know? But I found that like getting buy-in from the team leads, you know, from above, always having backup, which like, hey, look at this, look at the logs. By the way, there's a saved log view or a saved view for that dashboard. You can do that, and just making them do it, you know, as much as possible, but giving them the tools that they actually need to do it, and always being available if they get like stuck a little bit. Cause you know these people, they have like one little problem and the whole thing is completely like scrubbed, you know?
Yeah. I think along those lines, like you said, getting stakeholder buy-in and having them kind of push it where you don't necessarily have the authority to is pretty important. But also getting like I found finding developer champions of people that are willing to try things differently, and then using them kind of as the guinea pigs to put together data points to show that, you know, this team has adopted these things, and then these are the, like, in the last month, this is their amount of failed releases to production compared to the other teams that aren't following these practices. And as much as possible, just getting the data to make the argument for you is what I've found personally to be the most impactful way to get these things done.
Yeah, the developer champions idea is an excellent one. I just made a friend in one of the devs that I saw was you're working on some logging stuff, and the last conversation we had was where he was like, yeah, cool, JSON logging, I'll look into that. I think that's a good idea. So, you know, you find people out there, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Eric, is this problem coming up because you're getting involved in product, you know, development and delivery conversations too late? Would it be more helpful for you to start like, hey, I've got an idea. Great, we already have all these good ways to facilitate you instead of making them all up from scratch?
I'm sort of an observer on the other side. I still maintain all my infrastructure and do like all that stuff where we're sort of, you know, atomic within the organization. But I'm on the team of SREs, so like I hear about what the issues are and, you know, keep abreast of that stuff. But I don't have interaction with most of those guys. All my developers we've been together for years now, and everybody's like respectful and nice, but that's not always happening when we get the pushback. So I can't speak to the larger process of when we get in there and how that happens at this point.
I'd have your team target the back end of root cause analysis, you know, RCAs, and then resurface lessons that, you know, you want to start making the solution part of just general standard procedure.
Like, can you give a quick example of that?
So if a team that you're not necessarily embedded in has an incident and they have a root cause analysis, you know, you don't necessarily have to be super involved in that, but just take it on and do a review of all these RCAs and incidents that happen over time and start to point to things and say, guys, here's a good way that we can solve that forever so it doesn't happen again, you know?
Yeah, that's like a task force to really surface these issues. I could see it turning into like a group therapy session, but a helpful one.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, where you mentioned you hear about these issues. Like, I think we all hear about quite a lot of issues, but taking the step to become involved, like actively involved in solving these issues in a productive manner, rather than waiting to just keep hearing about these pain points that are expensive and that we can solve. Like, that's the real step we need to take.
yeah.
So on the documentation side, if you have really copious amounts of documentation that are not out of date, have lots of examples, I'm really curious how something like Danswer will work. It's kind of cool because it's open source. I didn't know that it was backed by Y Combinator. I wonder if that's a new thing, if they recently applied and got in. It's looks like the core of almost everything that you'd probably want initially if you don't have concerns around role-based access controls, for example. In the community edition, you can connect everything from Slack, Confluence, GitHub repositories, I believe, tons of data sources. And it builds the language model on the back end so you can interact with it. And you can interact with it both through this UI, but you can also interact with it as a Slack bot. And I think that gets kind of interesting. Plus, if you're getting a lot of hallucinations, one might be concerned that your documentation is also hallucinatory or non-existent.
That's neat.
So, has anyone ever given Danswer a shot? Nope. All right. Well, good question, Eric. All right. Any more questions?
Does anybody have experience with ECS anywhere?
ECS anywhere. Oh, interesting. Not EKS, but ECS.
Yeah.
Huh. I confess, I knew EKS anywhere. I didn't know ECS anywhere was a thing.
I remember the announcement, but now I've actually got a use case.
This is the wrong country. Sorry, I was clicking on the wrong link. It's kind of funny that was the first one was accurate. Okay. What's your use case?
Oh, we've got a bunch of hardware resources we want to make use of, and our utilization isn't where we want it to be. You know, you see those bucks flying out the window, and you get a little sad. So we want to be able to take some of our workloads and make use of this available resource. ECS Anywhere seems pretty good. They've got the announcement for the product is way better than our actual product page, as usual from Amazon. But you turn on the agent on some server somewhere, and you can add it as an external launch type and manage it through ECS in the AWS console. It seems pretty good. They've got a bunch of solutions available for things like vSphere, if you've got vSphere, or just on bare metal. It's designed to be hardware agnostic. So in theory, you can launch whatever your tasks are as long as they can fit inside your host. Like, I don't know. I just wanted to see if anyone has experience with this.
So they're not charging per cores or other things. So it's literally per agent that you install, and you only need one agent per like VM or bare metal host.
So if you got a giant like 256 thread instance with, you know, you see the value prospect.
Yeah, I feel it.
Which API do you manage it with after installing the agent? Is it like the EC2 API or?
Well, you get on the agent, and I haven't done it myself. I've looked at the demos, and it looks like you get on your instance, you run the agent install. It takes about 5 minutes, and it becomes registered in your ECS console as a resource you can deploy to.
I think we're considering something like this for EKS, for like a hybrid on-prem.
Yeah, EKS is also a consideration, but that 6x pricing for out of maintenance versions from AWS really is a deterrent.
And that applies to on-prem as well?
I'm assuming if it's something that's under the purview of AWS, which EKS Anywhere would be, I think you're still going to get hit with that 6x pricing.
I think it's just for the control plane. And then there's whatever window of kubelet that's compatible with that version of the control plane.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the worst thing to be forced. Like it's literally a whip at your back forcing you to do updates. Some companies need it.
Yeah, ours is coming up.
Did you guys hear those two beeps while I was talking earlier? That was EKS 126 finishing in one of my environments, because 2 Mondays ago I got my AWS bill and there was an extra couple of grand tacked on there. EKS extended support. I got to get it upgraded just in time to hit the 126 end of extended support. I'm feeling it.
And it's that billing is not like it's not like per the second, or like it's like boom, you rolled over into a new month or whatever, and you get that chunk of billing. It's
precipitous increase, I think, is the term for what those Datadog charts look like.
Yeah. I forget which version it was, but just like yesterday was like the cutover for one of these versions end of life.
There are a few things like this in AWS, like your RDS certificate updates that you've got to validate your infrastructure against.
Yeah, if you don't have the automatic DNS checks. I find it tremendously annoying. You can't generate ACM certs dynamically for EKS ingresses yet.
Oh, it's the worst.
I haven't followed any threads on or a cert manager. Cert manager supports PCA, private CAs, but it doesn't support just regular ACM.
I bet you that's a feature. Their roadmaps are public. I bet we could find it somewhere.
Oh yeah.
You can only use the ACM certificates on Amazon's own infrastructure components.
Yeah, but like, the ALB controller, that's provisioning an Amazon service. Why can't it also provision an ACM certificate for you? If you need it.
Sure, it can't.
I'm pretty sure you can't, yeah.
Maybe, okay. But then I guess you could use the one of the other, what do you call it? The Amazon controllers for
Yeah, CK,
Kubernetes, right?
yeah, ACK, Amazon
Yeah.
controller for Kubernetes, yeah.
If you go all in on that, you'll have 150 controllers soon.
I know, it becomes a whole new problem in and of itself.
You could say the same about Terraform and their providers, but they are fewer. There's more in each provider, and it's a lot easier to just have them downloaded. There's not much config to them. So the controller thing, that's mayhem. I've been thinking about a few, but if I step into that domain, it's gonna go crazy.
The thing that annoys me about controllers is you can't deploy multiple versions concurrently. So you can't, do a soft rollout or progressively move custom resources from one version to the next. It's all in.
If they're namespaced, maybe, if they support
No,
namespaces.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I want to be wrong. So if
yeah.
somebody knows for
yeah.
sure, please correct me. I don't believe that's the case.
You'll have to do virtual clusters then.
Yeah, maybe that's all the abstractions.
Yeah. No, I like the way at Terraform. It's really easy to just have you can have 100 different versions and 100 different routes. It's no problem.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Let's see. We got another 15 minutes or so. Any other questions we can cover today? I've been waiting for Matt Gowie to rejoin. I did have one question, but it was because I saw Matt Gowie had it somewhere. Has anyone used gitStream? I was just curious if it works for you. Any other code review tools, platforms that speed things up effectively? No. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, we definitely covered the whole Redis debacle. It hit close to home because it came relatively close. I mean, within the same, was it 6 or 8 months of the whole HashiCorp BSL thing. The backstory on Redis is also really interesting. Also, it's already been forked by Amazon and other players, all participating in it. I forget the name of the kind of official fork. Anyone remember?
KeyDB is a good one.
Wasn't Valky?
Was it Valky? That was it.
Yeah, KeyDB and Valky are the two that I like to point at.
Yeah, well, I'm in the wrong.
Elastic.co did another similar fork, which is why you only get up to like Elastic 7.10 in OpenSearch.
KDB, those snapshots all fork, right? Couple of years old.
Yeah, KeyDB's been around longer. But it's they ripped out things, didn't they?
I think so.
To make it simpler, faster. details.
Did I remember seeing something on Reddit. Did IBM end up purchasing HashiCorp?
Yes,
Uh,
maybe.
Well, I think it's not going to be finalized until the end of the year. I mean,
Okay.
they've executed the agreement to acquire them, but it takes a while, I guess, to close.
I think I heard that there was some legal or at least, internal political issues with accusing the leadership of basically doing this for their own benefit, and they're getting benefits, share types or whatever it is that are not available to the public. Heard something about that. I just read.
Yeah, if you have something to share on that, that'd be interesting. I didn't see that.
What sort of benefit?
A different class of securities, I think it was. In, their options, stock, whatever, however the deal works.
You want those.
Everybody wants them, and everybody isn't getting them, which is the problem.
Oh, this confused me so much with Dragonfly. Because so somebody was sharing Dragonfly. I didn't realize it was a Redis alternative, because there's another project called Dragonfly, which is used by every major service in China, pretty much, as a distributed P2P container registry.
Yeah, no, that confuses me as well. I thought it was the same sort of project, same people that did it, but apparently not.
Yeah. Dragonfly, P2P. Yeah, this one. Also a CNCF incubating project.
Then there's a BST distribution, Dragonfly as well.
What'd you say?
There's a BST, Dragonfly BST as well, OpenBSD derivative. Or
Oh,
NetBSD, I'm not sure.
Their license is BSD? Or I'm not following.
No, there's an OpenBSD operating system called Dragonfly BSD.
Oh, there's like, okay.
I don't remember if it's NetBSD or OpenBSD based, but it's
Okay.
one of the two. So I actually ran Dragonfly 2, which is not the specific thing for Docker, which is a peer-to-peer project. I used to run that a couple of years ago to distribute RPM, really huge RPM packages.
Yeah, I could never get my head really around BSD. I had it running on a server for a little while, but it was so foreign coming from a Linux background. It felt so dated. Maybe that's what BSD people would say of Linux.
Oh, Dragonfly is actually a CNCF incubating project. Didn't realize. The P2P, the peer-to-peer based file distribution project.
Yeah, the other Dragonfly, not this Dragonfly. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. The way I used it with the RPM packages, so several gig size, was incredibly fast.
I just threw a link to the latest version of Bruce Perens' post open source license. Seems like a crowd that would appreciate that.
I don't, this is the first time I hear about it. I plead ignorance. Can you fill me in?
No, I can't, because I remain ignorant. It was a headline that caught my eye.
Okay.
I was hoping somebody had I assume somebody there on the call would have heard about that.
Who is Bruce?
Bruce Perens is a big guy in the open source community from way back. When
Okay.
I joined the Bay Area Linux users group in 1995, he was running the Linux crew at Pixar, doing the first rendering of, I guess it was Toy Story, on the first like professional use of Linux. Well, I was like beating down doors at Sybase trying to get those guys to approve Linux builds. he was actually had like a cluster, farm over there. And he's just been involved in open source type stuff ever since.
Interesting. Yeah, so
A credible voice, I'd say.
OG open source Linux guy. Yeah, I'm not able to skim this and really get anything out of it yet. So
Sorry to just dangle that.
Jeremy posts in the chat. Note to self: make BI language, business intelligence language that's free for the first 100 queries, and then costs 10,000 a month, and call it Dragonfly. Because Dragonfly is apparently the name du jour. It's like baby names, right? They come in trends, in waves. All right. Any more questions? All right. No more questions. Going once. Going twice. All right. 3 times, and we're ending early. You get some time back. I'm sure everyone can appreciate that. And get an early lunch maybe. Thank you all for joining. We're going to be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse. In a few hours, it'll be there. If you're curious if Cloud Posse can move the needle for you at your organization, you can book a meeting with me directly. Go to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. And if you like office hours, you can't always attend them, but you also listen to podcasts. If you haven't subscribed, that's another way you can get your weekly dose of Cloud Posse's office hours. Go to podcast.cloudposse.com and listen however you listen to your podcasts. They're on all major platforms. So register for next week's office hours by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. And look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Mark, for the shout out.